Well, I finished all my marsh pieces on those CD bases, but it does mean that at the moment I've still got all my glue, my flock, CD bases and some other bits and pieces all out as well. So while they're here, I might as well make use of them. Yes, today on Dragon's Teeth, we're going to build some more scatter terrain. Hi, and thanks for joining me. So yeah, the idea today is I've got those marsh pieces done on the CDs, but I'd still like a few more bits and pieces to put around the table. So I've had a couple of ideas, and I also spotted something on Etsy that I thought would work really well, but more about that later on. Anyway, I have the option to use the CDs again, but perhaps it's time to try something different. Let's see. Last time I used my CDs for bases, I've still got plenty of those, but I want to break away from this regular shape. So I'm going to go back to using my floor tiles. These are a couple of mil thick and they're sticky on one side, so very easy to cut. And you can use card, of course, but I find card, once you put PVA or anything on, can tend to warp a little bit. These stay nice and flat. So that's going to be my base. I've been out in the garden because I said I wanted to make some rocky outcrops and that sort of thing. I've been gathering up stones from the front garden, much to the puzzlement of the neighbours. They should be used to it by now. And the nice thing is with some of these stones, they've got this sort of greenish moss effect already on them, so I don't have to paint those at all really. So the first thing I'm going to do then is just cut out some base shapes and get these rocks and then my scatter put on. I'm just using a figure here for scale, ideal for scale, but I'm not going to make these too big, maybe 3 or 4 inches in a sort of oval shape. So let's get cutting. Okay, that's my bases cut out. I've got my large rocks, I've got my smaller stones as well. I think that was some scatter that I bought, and should I need it, I've got some other bits and pieces as well. Again, this is all collected from the garden. What I'm going to do then, just to build up a little bit of groundwork to set the rocks in, is just use my usual filler. I don't want these too high, but obviously a little bit of height, something to stick these in, and then I'll put my grass and scatter on top of that. Alright, that's 10 pieces done. I think that will do for now. What I'm going to do is let these dry off, and then I'll come back tomorrow. I'll paint the bases and I'll start putting on my scatter and my grass and that sort of stuff. Right, on to the second idea which I had, which is along similar lines, but just a little bit bigger. My second idea is, as well as those rocky outcrops, to build some individual menhirs, or monoliths, individual standing stones. Now, I am planning to make a complete stone circle, because I've got a sort of altarpiece and other bits and pieces to go with that. So I'm going to put that at the centre of a stone circle build. But that's going to go on one of my 12-inch square MDF tiles, so that'll be more of a centerpiece piece of terrain. But I thought it might be nice, especially for the upcoming sort of haunted swamp scenario, to have a few odd standing stones around. I'm using something I've not used before, foam board. I've got a few sheets or boards of this. I'm going to see how that works out. In terms of scale, I've got my figure for scale, of course. But I've also got one of my obelisks from the graveyard build, which, as you may remember, were housed in what I called the pizza boxes. So I'm going to use this for height to make sure that I don't build these so tall that they can't fit in those boxes. This is a good idea, I think, to make your terrain a uniform height so you know it will all store in the same boxes. I don't have to get a load of extra boxes just for a few bits of terrain. So what I'm going to do first of all is just rule off the height here, so I've got a guide, and then I'll cut maybe 3 or 4 individual pieces and we'll work from there. There's my 4 stones then. As you can see, I've made them slightly different sizes because of course these things are never totally regular unless they're part of a stone circle perhaps. Next thing is just to carve these up a bit to get them into shape. Once I've done that, I'm going to use my foil to go over and texture the surfaces, and then I'll cut out a couple more bases from my tiles. Probably won't need anything too big, maybe a base just a little bit bigger than that one, so a few more of those to cut out, build up the groundwork, stick those in, and then I can get on to painting them. I just had an idea for this sort of taller, thinner monolith. I'm just going to texture 2 of the sides with the foil, and I'm going to leave the front and back smooth. So what I do is I'll take a cocktail stick and I'm going to carve some sort of runes in the faces here. I thought that might look quite interesting. Then perhaps when I paint this, I can put some other different colour in those runes, maybe a sort of fluorescent yellow or something to make it look like they're glowing. I thought it'd just be something a little bit different, give it an interesting look. Now, with excellent timing, this turned up in this morning's post. This was something I picked up off of Etsy. I was looking around at scatter. I thought it might be nice to have some statues. This one caught my eye. I have to say mainly because of the price. It was a lot cheaper than some of the others. It's in 2 halves, but they'll easily glue together. And as you can see, it is pretty large. It's quite a size. Now, I'm a bit torn with this one because I thought what would be nice would be to have a half submerged statue perhaps, which would mean cutting off a certain amount of it about here. Or the other thought was to have it totally laying down, recumbent as it were, in amongst the marshes. Again, that's going to mean cutting off quite a bit of the base here, which this looks like quite hard resin. So that's going to take a saw, and I'm not really keen to be cutting into resin, to be honest. So I think what I'll do for now, as I'm up against the clock as well, is just join this together, glue this together, and then paint it, but make it look very old and overgrown. Maybe put some extra bits of foliage or flock on the statue itself. That way, when I transport it, it will lay down in the box, and you know, it might be in the future I can either adapt this and use it in another way, or I'll get another one knowing that I'm going to be sawing that in half. So anyway, let's get this stuck together. And I'm going to use a little bit of filler on this as well. There's just a bit of a line here, but also just to strengthen the join. Yeah, see on this side there's a bit of a gap. So, you know, you buy stuff that's a little bit cheaper, you expect that, but that's easily remedied with just the application of some putty or filler here. Next step is to paint my bases, and I'm just using my normal cheap acrylic brown for that. I'm going to paint the stones and also that statue with a black undercoat. I could spray those, but the spray paint I've been using lately, it's very messy. I've got quite a cheap spray can, and to be honest, I'm not 100% sure that can from an aerosol is going to react well with the foam board, so I don't want to chance that. So I'll go old-fashioned route with the paint and a brush. So we'll start with the brown first. And I'm not going to touch the stones at all in this because, you know, they've got a natural colour. I'm not going to be able to improve on that. Alright, from there I'm going to give my statue and my standing stones a coat of grey. Not quite a dry brush, but not quite a, a wet brush either. And again, for this sort of thing, I just use a cheap acrylic. So we'll squeeze some of that out. Oh. Once again, I always find with cheap paints, it's, you know, you give a little squeeze like that, and I've got enough there to paint half of the shed. But there we go, that's the reason it's cheap, I guess. So we'll start with the statue. I don't want to fully load, so I will take a little bit of paint off and then I'll start brushing. So I want to keep a little bit of that black showing through in the dark places. The dark places. You might also see here something that you get on cheaper 3D prints are these lines. I guess that's where the model is made up. Again, on a statue or a piece like this, it doesn't really matter to me that much, but that might be something to be aware of. If you're buying some figures, sometimes this can be quite prominent. I'm going to let the stones dry now before I put on a final dry brush on those. So while those are drying, I'm going to start PVAing my bases and adding my scatter and grass. And I don't know if you can see that there. Those runes that I carved in, looks like they're going to come out quite nicely. I've just ordered up some fluorescent paint of various colours, so I'm going to try filling those runes with the fluorescent paint. Anyway, let's get the PVA out again. I've got my usual mix of scatter, some herbs from the kitchen, some static grass, some sort of grit and sand, and remember I found that big bag of grass for my marsh terrain. I've still got tons of that and various other little bits and pieces as well. But first things first, let's get some glue ready. And we'll start applying that to our bases. I'll probably apply to all of these and then put the scatter on after, rather than doing one at a time. I've dry brushed my statue in a very pale grey to bring out some highlights. As you can see, I've also attached some flock to the base and to the statue itself, because I want this statue to look aged. So a little bit of moss and stuff growing on it. And to finish it off, I'm going to give it a wash. This is the one I call Innsmouth Green. And I found this worked very well on my Esoteric Order of Dagon build, to really give the building that sort of algid or moss covered look. and just to tone everything down. So that's what I'm just going to put onto the statue here, just to finish that off. And even though this is a wash, I'm still adding in a little bit of water because I want this to be quite subtle. I don't really want to slather it in green. And I do know from experience with this stuff, when it dries out, it does tone down quite a lot as well. I've also highlighted my menhirs, my standing stones, and I'm going to give these a wash as well. However, before I do that, these ones with the runes, as I mentioned, I wanted to put some fluorescent paint in here to see if I can make those stand out. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is just put some white paint in first, because what I've often found with bright paints is they don't sit very well on a black undercoat or a black background. So I'm going to do that first. And then these are what I bought the other day from Amazon, 6 colours of fluorescent paints. These were £8. And as you can see, we've got fluorescent pink, orange, yellow, lemon, green, blue and purple. So that's the white put in place. I can always tidy that up once I've put the fluorescent paint on. I thought I'd go for a fluorescent purple. Why not? Never used these paints before. Meaden paints. So I don't know what to expect. That's certainly a nice vibrant purple. I'm using a size 1 brush here. This is a new one, so the tip is still in good shape. I'm terrible about looking after my brushes. So what I'm trying to do is get that in the actual indentation without getting too much on the surrounding rock. So there's my runes painted in, looking suitably bright. Now I wanted just to highlight these a little bit, so I tried using an acrylic paint pen just to put black around the edges to make them stand out. But it's a little bit too black, it's a little bit too dark. So what I think I'm going to do is I will do the rest of those, just go around the outside. If I just do one here, you see I can just almost outline that rune, and then I'll go over that with a grey just to tone down that black, because that looks a little bit too stark. Once that is done, then all the stones will get a wash of Innsmouth green again. Obviously I don't want to get that wash in the over the purple there, so I'll have to be very careful at that. But the other stones I can just slap it on to give a nice effect. So I'm just going to outline these first of all, then get that grey over the top. There we are then, that's everything sprayed up and varnished and finished. So they're ready for the table. I had to get these done pretty quickly because we've got our second test game of We Want the Gold Monday week. And I want to take as much of the terrain and figures down there as I can this Monday. Because basically Monday nights for me, I run my Tai Chi class, which finishes at 7, which is the time that Bedford Gladiators opens. It normally takes me about 15 minutes to get down there. So the more stuff I can have ready and in place, the guys can be setting it up if necessary, then that all saves time. So do keep an eye out for that report coming up. Of course, we'll do a battle report on that, which, as I mentioned before, will feature Paul's ruined temple. So looking forward to that. Now, another question I've had in with regards to terrain is, do I build pieces to order? Well, to be honest, it's not something I've ever done. It's not something I've particularly thought of. Many years ago, back in the day at Ilford War Games Group, we often did sort of group terrain builds, or, you know, there'd be a project going on. Everyone would take part in that. But yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to do that. If you have a piece of terrain that you think I'm able to build to a reasonable standard, get in touch. and we can work out the practicalities. Obviously, things like transport and postage and that sort of thing need to be worked out. But yeah, I'm always happy to take on something like that, especially if you want something a little bit different, you know, something a little bit customized or tailor-made. That's the end of this build. Really just those scatter terrain pieces, quite a quick and easy one that. The next one is going to be a bigger project because I'm starting up on my Innsmouth build. In fact, I just had an email yesterday that said that order that I put in at Empire Games is on its way. I think there's pounds worth of buildings. There's about a dozen buildings and various bits and pieces. So I'm looking forward to getting all that together. I'm going to incorporate the graveyard build that I did before, and this is going to be one of the games that will be on at the Innsmouth Literary Festival on the 27th September in Bedford. You'll be able to come along, take part in that. You can take control of one of the characters or one of the deep ones, you know, for 10-15 minutes or so until you either go mad or make someone go mad. It's a chance just to drop in, and that will be using the modern horror version of the We Want the Gold rules as well. I'll have all those ready by then. So that's the forthcoming build. No doubt Innsmouth is going to get used for lots of different things and lots of different scenarios. Keep an eye out for that. And also, I'm filming this on Saturday. Next Saturday, I'm on the train down to London to go to Salute. I believe it's at the Excel Centre, which I don't think I've ever been to before. I'm pretty sure I've been to Salute, but many, many years ago. I'm looking forward to getting down there, have a look round, see what's going on. No doubt do some shopping. Of course, I'll be doing some filming. I'll do a report on that. And if you do see me wandering around there, please do come up and say hello. Okay, that's it for today. As always, please keep your questions and suggestions coming in. Thanks to everyone who has subscribed to and supported the channel. And if you haven't already, please do click like, share and subscribe because it really does help the channel grow. That's it for now. I'll see you soon.